Okay, let's start. So 220 million people in Pakistan, $257 billion of consumer spending, 75 million broadband subscribers. Pakistan's transition towards the digital economy is accelerating at a very, very high pace. There has been a lot of growth in the operations and funding of local technology startups, and Pakistan already has a decent amount of organizations working in the technology sector. Even the conventional industries have started transitioning towards the technological side. This, coupled with a large middle class, a highly young population, and increasing internet penetration, shows a very, very promising future. Technology usage in Pakistan is only going to grow. And these aren't just Pakistan specific trends. This is a worldwide phenomena. Everyone is going to go digital. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sameet Khan, and I'm the co-founder of president of the LUMS Tech Club. Welcome to our first event, and thank you for the amazing turnout. This is genuinely cool. This is our first event, and what I'll do is I'll take a minute maximum to introduce what the LUMS Tech Club is. So the LUMS Tech Club has a threefold purpose. Firstly, we want to enable interaction between the technology sectors and the students. No matter how good a university's curriculum is, there's always going to be a gap between what they are taught in their universities and what is happening in the industry. So we want to make it a two-way learning process for both the students and the industry. Secondly, we want to provide skill enhancement opportunities for the students. That includes training in the technical tools that are used in product management or other technological ventures. Lastly, we want to engage with technology companies for career opportunities for graduates. We want to make sure that there's a steady stream and there's a lot more information about possible careers in technology, whether in Pakistan or abroad. So now that we have done that, let's move on to the event that we have today. So what we felt that given the increasing amount of technology-based professions, one of the basic emerging professions is that of a product manager. Based on this, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the webinar on product management in association with our outreach partners, IBA Marketing Club and Karachi School of Business Administration. But what is product management? Who is a product manager, and how can we become one if we want to become one? To help us answer that, we have a panel of highly talented and successful professionals with experience in global and local organizations. Our panelists are Hania Zia, Sayyid Fahadullah Hussaini, Palvasha Faizan, and Tafsir Haider Rizvi. I'll go over their brief introductions one by one as well. So Hania is currently a volunteer at Digital Pakistan Initiative. She is on a sabbatical for Google, where she has worked in Silicon Valley, in Singapore, and in Switzerland. Before that, she was a student at Yale, where she graduated in psychology and computer sciences back in 2016. Our second panelist is Sayyid Fahadullah. Fahadullah is currently a product manager at Careem now. And before that, he has started and initiated delivery platforms in KSA in UAE. Before Kareem, he was an analyst at OLX Pakistan. And before that, he was a student researcher and an alumni researcher at LUMS, where he worked in machine learning under Drs. Fareed and Adil. Our third panelist is Palvasha Faizan. Palvasha is a senior manager for digital products in HBL. And before that, she has worked in JazzCash and EasyPesa, working on their fintech availabilities. Palvasha is also a LUMS graduate, graduating in 2016 with an economics degree. Our final panelist, Tafsir Haider Rizvi, is currently a digital platforms and growth expert at Jazz. He has worked in the rebranding and the relaunch of the EasyPesa app, and before that was at Telenor as a product analyst for the My Telenor app. He is also a LUMS graduate, graduating in 2016 with a management sciences degree. So now that we have a brief introduction of the panelists, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the first question. And this is, what is product management in your specific context? For that, firstly, we'll go to Hania Zia to tell us about her experiences.
Okay, thanks so much, Sumit, and thank you for having us all here. I'm really excited for this panel. So, what is product management? The way I think I'm assuming most people here are technical, but the way I explain it to lay people is that engineers are the ones who build the website, build the app, build any service, and product managers are the ones who are deciding what should we build, like what makes sense for the customer, what makes sense for the business. And basically, the way that we were taught at Google is you're kind of like the CEO of your own little product or your own little feature. So you have to think about everything end to end and make sure that it's making sense for the end user. And so it also means different things in very different contexts. So when I started at Google, I was working on hardware and hardware projects. So I was working on Chromebooks, which are Google's laptops. Hardware projects can take up to a year to make. So then what you're doing is a lot more everything is a lot more drawn out versus some projects where there's a really quick turnover and there's a lot required from you. Another analogy that people like to use is that a product manager does anything that they need to do to make sure that their product gets out the door. Whether that's working with legal, working with marketing, or even just like sometimes like writing SQL scripts myself, or doing very menial tasks like just like over communicating in a document, making sure stakeholders are aligned. Just you really feel the ownership, and you make sure that you can protect the engineers' time so they can code and be productive, and then make sure that what you're doing is going out there. So that was it at Google, and also in an evolving situation. What you do as a product manager is you gather all of those requirements and kind of translate them from business speak to technical speak, so that you can translate to, okay, and this is the problem, but this is what actually needs to be built. And then make sure that the stakeholders are in line, make sure everyone is bought in, and then kind of try to launch things as much as possible. And then another thing that we like to think about is that it's not just about launching. Like, it's not just about the big flashy launch where something gets out the door, but it's also about landing. So once your product is launched, how do you know that it has landed well? Meaning that people are using it, people are happy with the experience, people are being retained, people are returning to it. So you have to do also continuously do data analysis on your product, and strive for product excellence. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Hania. So moving on from a global tech giant to a regional one. So what is product management in the context of Kareem? Fahad?
Yeah, thank you first of all, Sameer and LUMS team, for conducting this webinar, and I hope everyone is safe and sound in this situation. I can talk about this context, but first I would like to talk about that there is an increasing trend of software products, tech startups in this region, and with this context, with this increasing potential of all these tech startups, the product management role is very crucial. Why do I say that? Because a product manager is the one who actually gets into the context, gets to the market, understand what customer needs are, what customer problems are, and try to solve that, as Hania mentioned, through engineering or tech solutions. And they will actually take up the lead to solve it through the whole end to end, what needs to be what needs to go out in the market, or so in this context, Pakistan and Middle East, we have the product manager needs to consider a lot of local context as well. So in this region, there is a problem of in Pakistan and Saudi, which are two biggest markets in this region. We have a problem of internet penetration. We have a problem of like Pakistan is at 36-37%. We have a problem of smartphone penetration, and credit card penetration as well. So just to give you an example, from a Kareem side, there's also a problem, like not a problem, but a cultural context as well, where Kareem was a pioneer where in movement of people, uh, Kareem empowered women to go out alone with a stranger as a captain, and then it started a movement. So this problem of going out, moving the movement of people can be solved through a good product management. I will just shed light on the cash problem. So just to give you an example, there was a core problem in when you take a ride with Kareem. There was a problem that captains usually didn't have change when customer gives them cash. So this was not a problem for Uber for longest time because they weren't in the cash markets. But in Kareem, they introduced this wallet feature where this solves that overpayment problem or the change problem. So from product manager point of view, they need to understand the customer problem that we are having and bring in engineering solution to solve that problem. So this is one way. In this context, we can solve those problems. So and yeah, we have a lot of talent as well in this region. It's just that, as Samir mentioned, that we need to bridge gap between what industry wants as product management skills and what is taught in the universities and in the and certifications. So yeah, in this context, we are in the right path, and product management is very has a huge potential in our region.
Thank you, Fahd, for your answer. Before I move on to the next panelist, I'd like to say that we'll be taking questions at the end. So if any attendee has any question, they can just message the co-hosts and we'll answer the questions at the end. Now, we have talked about global and regional companies. Now, we want to focus more on companies which are delivering solutions primarily for the audience in Pakistan. So what we'll do is that we'll move on firstly to the fintech sector. And in the fintech industry, we'll start with Palvasha Faizan, who is the senior manager of digital platforms at HBL. Palvasha.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Samit. So product management is something that allows you to find solutions to problems that are right in front of you at any given day or time. So for me, at HBL, working in a traditional banking organization that has existed for over 90 years, product management takes on a really new meaning in a way that we have to look on the inside to see how can we respond to the changes that are happening in the world around us. And we also want to ensure that we are modern and current in our digital solutions and products that we make for the new millennials and the Gen Zs. So product management in terms of banking and financial services is basically a blank canvas where anybody can paint anything that they feel would add beauty to the entire industry and the ecosystem. And there is so much to be done that I think every time once you recognize that opportunity or once you recognize that lens, you start looking into issues just like Fahad pointed out, the cash issue, the fact that too many banknotes are still used for day-to-day exchange among consumers. The fact that we still have to physically go to an ATM, which is such a huge hassle for anybody who's a millennial and a Gen Z. They would really dread that trip of going to the ATM and taking out that cash money, right? For you to not be able to make your payments remotely from a phone, or for us to not think in our subconscious that is the first thing that we are supposed to do, that just pick up a phone and top up your mobile load, and that is all that you need to do in order to continue in life and go on to do whatever you like to do. So product management, at least from the fintech experience in the past 3 years, has really changed meaning, because I feel that every time you look around you and you look globally, there are so many countless examples of fintech startups that have done really, really great. But in Pakistan, even though we have big players and I have represented almost all those big players like Easy Pesa, Jazz Cash, and Connect, and HBL now, I still feel that the answer is still missing, because we do not look on the inside as much as we should. What that means is that what are the things that are going to crack the case in Pakistan? What are the problems that we see every time we step outside of our homes, and the way that we see exchange of notes happening, or any business trip that we dread, any payment that we do not want to make and we want to spend our times elsewhere. That is where product management really comes in, your innovative thought process in how to implement that problem, that subliminal thought that is in your head, into a real life physical product. And I feel the most important thing in cracking project management is to ensure that you have a really specific technical insight, an idea that you can almost explain in an elevator pitch, to be able to transform into a product that goes out in the market and does well. Because there are going to be many great opportunities that you will see around you, right? For example, um, saying that we want to just reduce the amount of cash notes that are circulated in the market, or the fact that we go to the restaurant and we want to make a bill payment right as soon as we see the receipt and not wait for a card. The fact that we do not want to use a card in the first place, but we really want to understand what is the business goal that you're trying to achieve from that product. Because only when that business goal and that technical insight is very, very clear will you be able to be specific to that problem. And no problem is small enough to not have a product that could solve that issue. So self-reflection for a product manager is the most important thing to do. What are the things that you observe on your daily on a daily basis, or what are the things that you look at and you feel I could fix that or do that better? As soon as I entered HBL 2 years ago, I was from Islamabad, and for me, from a get-go, it was a culture shock. 5 elevators that I had never seen before, taking you to like a tall building of floors that you would never really understand why, and waiting for an elevator to come for 15 to 20 minutes, and realizing that elevators is also a form of public transportation that has never really registered to you. But those are the kind of things that product managers do, right? Making things that I might not have thought possible. So product management is about continuously rechecking yourself, reflecting in yourself, and seeing what is the need of the market, what is the need of times. Especially in COVID-19, I feel it is the most important thing to understand how can you respond to the changing circumstances around you. And product management is always about making lemonade out of the sourest lemons that life can possibly give you, because nothing will go your way. Most of the times, the things, the circumstances, and the assets that you are planning to have to get a successful product out are not going to happen. So it's all about your response to change. It's all about how you create and what is your process of creation to that problem and answering that problem. Over to you, Samit.
Thank you, Palvisha. Very interesting. So I think one thing that has been common in all three responses has been the local context. And with that, we'll move on to tafsir. So telecom companies in Pakistan represent a huge share of the consumption and production of digital services in Pakistan. So how is product management in telecom companies in Pakistan? Tafsir?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Samit, for having me here, first of all. And talking about the local context, I do feel like the product management domain is going to be similar across the global, the regional, and the local markets. So what's expected out of a product manager is going to be the same. He's going to be managing stakeholders. He's going to be making data-driven decisions. He or she is going to be conducting those usability studies and utilizing all of those frameworks in order to deliver the best product for the market. But what changes for each and every one of us is the local context and industry specific challenges that we're facing right now. So when we're talking about the product market fit, that's the key challenge that everyone's trying to understand and everybody is trying to focus on. So understanding your customers, understanding your audience, understanding what you can do specifically towards this industry, which can actually help with your product adoption. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all striving for, right? We're delivering a digital service, and what we want is adoption from the customers and adoption from the market. So at the end of the day, talking about the local and talking about the telco specific case, for example, is let's say, for example, we have recharge in our accounts, right? So customers can pick up their phone, they can recharge their self-care accounts, their Jazz, Telenor, or whatever accounts they have. They can recharge them, top their prepaid accounts directly from their app. But what we faced in the local market, the challenge was that people were going to retailers, physically going to a place, getting through all of those, let's say, for example, challenges of going towards that physical location and then topping up their account by paying in cash. So that's something which we're not able to understand. And now with the COVID-19 situation that we have, people are adopting these digital platforms. We've seen an uptake in recharge via self-care apps. So at the end of the day, what product managers are striving to achieve is to actually adapt to the changing circumstances, industry specific or maybe local or global, for this case, as an example. And what we're doing is actually building products which are the right fit for the audience that they're building these products for. So that requires a lot of segmentation, a lot of understanding, and a lot of reiterative processes. And one of the key qualities which I feel a product manager should have is the ability to pivot. I feel like a lot of people can anchor themselves towards a certain idea or a certain way of having a product deal with the customers. But at the end of the day, you should be able to have an open mind and an understanding of how different things can be tried out for the same end goal. And that's the key, I feel.
So thank you, Tasir. And we've actually seen very different, but rather, and at the same time, very similar definitions of what product management is. And like the different definitions, our panelists' journeys have also been very different regarding how they have managed to get to the current point. So since we just talked to Tafsir, we'll just continue with you, Tafsir. How did you get here? And by here, I mean Jazz, not the couch that you've been occupying for the last probably at least a month or so.
Yeah. So getting into the product management space essentially has been an interest in disruption, essentially. And I feel like the digital space is the most disruptive space to be in. And when I was getting into Telenor, the My Telenor app, a self-care platform, it was barely contributing to the revenues of the company. And the industry was not in any way completely digital at that point in time. But I did realize the importance of digitization in the industry and the importance of moving towards this space, and also understanding the importance of digital adoption in the future. So we've moved at a tremendous pace in terms of smartphone growth. Of course, we're still at 35, 36% of smartphone penetration when it comes to the 220 million population that we have. But we're moving towards the right direction. And I feel like my interest towards these disruptive platforms, to finding innovative solutions to our current and let's say, for example, older processes of conducting business is what got me towards this.
Okay. Thank you, Tasir, for your answers. Now, Palvasha, you and Tasir have actually shared a number of organizations, but maybe not at the same time. How
No,
has your
never.
experience? Yeah, well, you sound a little
Um,
relieved.
Yeah, so yeah, Tafsir and I have not crossed paths, but we have worked in similar organizations that have adopted to very different times. I must say, every time I left an organization, it sort of started doing better. But for HBL, I hope that's not the case. So I think starting from my journey, I graduated with a social science bachelor's degree in economics in 2016. And unlike most of my friends, I wanted to work in a corporation. And to find a right fit, it took me almost 5 months, and 5 months of unemployment and total blank mindset of where I would see myself. And then I ended up joining Telenor. So, and in Telenor, I ended up working on an app and I did not really know much beyond that. I just knew that I wanted to work in that culture and be a part of that culture. However, where I landed was fintech, and I was one of the lucky ones to land in an industry where I continued to stick, because moving quickly in your first or second year is actually very important to ensure that that title or that stain doesn't really remain on you. And I ended up joining Easy Pesa. I was working on the Easy Pesa app in its very, very primitive times. It's very different now. And I just started looking at financial services globally, locally, and regional, and at a regional level. What are the changes that are happening industry wide? I started researching, reading as much as possible to see if that was the knack that I had set for myself, or if it even interested me, right? And it was a very, very technical job. I do product development and I tell engineers how to make products, and it's a very daunting experience to begin with. But to gain that knowledge, reading up online and reading as much as possible on the internet taught me that you can become a master of anything if you set your mind to it. And I was interested, I was process oriented, I used to go into the depth of things, and I started my career from there. Within 9 months, I ended up joining Jazz Cash, where they were looking for somebody who would come in and make an entire application for banking financial services and launch it. And to me, that dream seemed like something that would be impossible. I ended up coming to Jazz in a 7-people team with 6 men and just me. I was only 22 at the time, and it was a very daunting experience to begin with, to enter into that environment and then seeing how can I fit myself into it, and then launch a complete application. That was my responsibility. And God willing, I ended up doing that in 7 months, and we launched a Jazz Cash application that is still out and about in the market. It has around 3 million 30-day active users. It's been doing pretty well. I did not really get to live with the fruits of my labor, and I ended up moving to HPL. So at HPL, the task was very different. At this time, I was not an entry-level professional anymore. I felt more prepared to answer to what I wanted to do in the organization, and my vision was very clear, that I wanted to make a platform that would engage with millennials and would work on organic growth. I know digital marketing is huge these days, but as a product manager, to keep the costs in check, to keep my results in check, I wanted to create a product that would just go viral from within. And that is something I was able to achieve at HPL, because 75% of the growth that we achieve on our platform is organic now. It is the most cost-effective way of acquisition that I have at least been able to crack in the past 3 years. And I will talk more about that when we come to that. But that has been my experience, and continuous struggle and reading on the internet, reading books that can help me out. I will also talk about that a little later. So these are the things that really got me where I am today. And just having an idea, a clarity of thought in my head, that I wanted organic growth, I wanted good products to be out in the market, and I wanted to make something that was not a rip-off from another country's idea. It was more like a learned experience with a technical insight that we would be implementing. So that's my journey.
Thank you, Parvasha. So, Fahadullah, I think if I'm not wrong, you have, as in you've been you've very recently become a product manager, and you've also worked a little in research as well. So, what are the twists and turns of your story post graduation to product management?
Yeah, so I think my journey started with research, but I didn't know back then that I wanted to be in product. I wanted to be applying to PhD. I did that for operations management, but I was doing research in machine learning, in data analytics. I got publications on biostatistics. What that in experience made me into was just be a problem solver through data. So data driven problem solver, I think, is the core of product management. And then when I joined OLX, from there onwards, as a business analyst, we were a team of 4. The whole like I was the 4th employee for OLX. Last time didn't even have an office, so I was in product analytics. So like OLX doesn't have the whole operation side of it, but it has like product analytics side of it. And it was a great experience in terms of we were able to give insights into product management in Dubai, to build products for to build those features that were helpful in terms of conversions and in terms of the metrics. So business analytics experience, data analytics experience, I think is the core that led me into that and led me into Kareem as well. So I joined Kareem in 2017 late, as a business analyst, and then gradually I went into as an analyst. I went into launching food as well. So we launched food at Kareem. I was in the team where we launched Dubai. And then when we launched Dubai, we had set up a basic food delivery setup for Kareem. I was offered product management back then in 2018. I on purpose I turned it down because I wanted to have in-depth operations experience before going into product. So this is very important if it is relevant to the audience, but because analytics plus operations, it will make you solid in terms of understanding the business problems. So when I went into operations as an expansion manager, what I used to do is I launched Saudi, Jeddah, in like food deliveries in Jeddah, or from scratch. So what we used to do is I went into a city, understand the problems, understand the whole city from a legal perspective, from a talent perspective, from a food delivery perspective, how restaurants work, how captains work there. So from scratch, we have to build and launch the product that we already had in Dubai. So with that experience and with that operations experience, I learned a lot of things, and then I made a playbook and launched Karachi as well. So in food deliveries in Karachi. So with those experiences, in-depth operations, now I was ready to move into product. So I had my part defined before joining in as expansion manager, that I will, after 1 year, will join product manager. So in October 2019, it's been 9 months, I guess, since I've been in product management, and it's been a very good decision, where I now can influence what I faced in operations, whatever problems I faced in operations, what needed to be done and can be done at scale from product management. Now I'm alhamdulillah doing it, and on the right path. So this is my
Thank
story.
you. Also, we are receiving a lot of questions, but we'll have to limit them. And a lot of them are repetitive, so hopefully the majority will get answered. Before we move on to the next panelist, by when is Kareem now launching in Lahore? Baki, as in, we'll move on with the session now.
Very soon. So hold your horses, very soon. Not only food but also other services as well.
Okay, Kenan, thank you. Now we'll move on to Hania. Hania, from leaving Pakistan back in 2012 to coming back now 8 years later. It has been a pretty global experience for you. So how has the journey been?
Oh, okay, sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Samid. Okay, so basically, I think I went into college thinking I want to study computer science, and there's a joke we have at Google that people who are not as technical, who are maybe not as good as engineering, they're the ones who go into product management. I don't think it's true across the board, but it was definitely true for me. I did a few engineering internships, and I think it just wasn't up my alley. In engineering, often you have to go really deep into one thing, whereas in product management, you can have 5 different projects running, and you're kind of running with all of them. And so I had done 2 engineering internships, and I heard about this thing called product management, and I thought that's worth a try. I was also studying psychology. I thought there was a lot of overlap, especially in user experience. And so I was lucky enough to get an internship at Google, and then that converted to a full-time offer. And I know I started in San Francisco, And I remember thinking like, oh, I really hope I just get like some simple front end, some app or some website. Because the first year in the Google Associate Product Manager program, you don't get to choose your role. They just randomly place you. So I was like, make it something like some front-endy simple thing. But I got Chrome OS, which is like an operating system based on Linux. I knew nothing about hardware. I would walk into meetings, again, similar to you, Bhavisha, the only girl, 22, and there's all these like 40-year-old engineers who have, some of them who have written the book on operating systems, like my textbook. And they're talking about things like kernel IO, and I have no idea what's going on. But I think similar to what Bhavisha and some of the others were saying earlier was that if you go really deep into something and if you just start reading up on it and ramping up, you'll realize like, I think it was a good learning lesson in that I thought it was a good way to learn that, you can learn anything if you put enough time and effort into it. And especially, and if you have a good technical basis, especially at Google, they really require that you have to have a computer science degree and a technical background to go into product management, because Google is an engineering driven company, and engineers just don't respect you if you don't know how to code, if you don't know the core concepts. They're not going to listen to you and your decision making ability, and you have to kind of influence them even though you're not their boss. So you're kind of influencing without authority. So that was a crazy experience. I was working on the Pixelbook software, the operating system software for the Pixelbook, and we were I remember we worked on this stylus solution. We actually ended up getting a patent for like one of the lowest latency styluses that was in the market at that time. And I got to go to China and see the factories. And then, but because of the program I was in, I had to, after 1 year, I had to switch. And then I wanted to switch into something more, like basically learn a new skill set. And I went into data analysis, and completely echo what Fahad was saying. I think learning data analysis is super important for any product manager. I was working on Google Maps and building like dashboards based off Google Maps data, so we could make more data-driven decisions on what features are people in Maps using, where we get, like where users being retained and where are they dropping off. And especially because Maps at that time was trying to evolve from the core concept of getting you to places to a bunch more other use cases, like helping you with local discovery, finding shops and restaurants, helping you track your own location, things like that. And then I think after a year of that, I realized that part of the reason I went into tech was because I think it can really help people, especially in emerging markets. And so I got in touch with this team at Google called the Next Billion Users team. And that team is focused on getting the next billion people online and building products specifically for them. Often at Google, we build specifically for like the US, and then we say, okay, now let's take the same thing and launch it in India or Pakistan or whatever. But this team was focusing on building for developing countries first. And actually, coincidentally, I think we've all worked in fintech here, because what I was working on was also called Google Pay. It was an app that we launched in India. And then my job was to take it to the next market. So I took that app, integrated with a bunch of banks in Singapore, and then relaunched it in Singapore for P2P and P2M. Peer-to-peer and peer-to-merchant payments. So interesting to me that everyone ended up being in fintech. So I did that for about a year and a half. And again, I think it was, again, getting obsessed with the problem, because I realized, wait a second, for this app to be so successful in India, it needed this underlying payment system. And then I started reading up a lot more about that payment system and realized that India was one of the first countries to build an open API on their payment system. And so I started going to a bunch of countries like Brazil, Mexico, Malaysia, Thailand. Even in Pakistan, we had a conversation with the state bank here and with Asad Umar, who was the finance minister at the time, about how they need to build this infrastructure for financial inclusion. And then we ended up publishing a white paper with the World Bank on this. And so it basically, so then the journey was more about like, okay, now I want to help people. And then I took 3 months off Google because I had launched my app, and I felt like, okay, this is a good conclusion, a good time for me to step back and think about what I want. And then I came to Pakistan, and so Tanya Adus, who's the head of Digital Pakistan, was actually my manager at Google. And I basically, COVID happened, and I really wanted to help, so I reached out to her. We walked into the health ministry one day in March. I think it was right in the early days of COVID. And then we realized that there's so much that needs to be done. So in the beginning, we worked a lot on this awareness raising. So I launched this messenger chatbot, and I launched this WhatsApp chatbot. And also the scale in Pakistan of doing product management in Pakistan is so different than abroad. In Singapore, I worked on an app for like a year and a half, and it probably in the first few days had a couple thousand users. But in Pakistan, I worked on that WhatsApp chatbot for like maybe a week, but we were working day and night, and we were launching it in 7 languages. And within a few days, it had 250,000 users. So it was just like the scale of and the potential for impact is just huge in Pakistan. And so we did a bunch of tech projects, but also a bunch of just like getting things moving within the government and pushing on that side, and using tech to help make data-driven decisions. So I remember in the early days, like the only way that our Prime Minister Imran Khan would find out that there are more cases in Sindh is because the Sindh Chief Minister would tweet about it, right? And so we built up this central database where every time there was a new COVID positive case, everything would need to be entered into that database. And so we could actually have a real-time view of like where are the new cases popping up. So there's a lot of like just basic infrastructure stuff that if you work in a tech company, you just assume that it's there, but because it's the government, it's not there. And so there's a bunch more things I worked on. I can talk about that more if there's curiosity. But like,
I think tackle them in the question and answer session yeah, but we will stay with you, Hania, for the next question, which is that, I think this is a very recurring question in our questions as well. How can adults get there? All of you have talked about your journey, but how does an aspiring product manager become a product manager? Hania, I think we'll just start with you again.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, having really deep technical knowledge is super important. I think even just any like engineering background for sure. I know there's some companies which are a bit more flexible. That's one thing. Second thing is be a self-starter. So I know what recruiters look for is like, have you started your own project or your own like little like GitHub project that you've been working on, and kind of just like taken something from like a small tech project to something bigger. And it doesn't have to be like an app or a website, but that's usually a good place to start. And it can also just be other things like, are you a leader within your college, or are you just taking initiative? Because as a product manager, remember, you're the CEO. You're not actually reporting back to anyone. At least my manager has no idea where I am and what I'm doing. And so you have to show that you can motivate yourself and push yourself. So I think those two things, and then people skills for sure are really important. We have a joke at Google about sometimes you only get stuff done because people like you and they like working with you. And I think also the joke is that PMs have way better people skills than engineers. And so you have to have really good people skills. And I think, as maybe Palvisha was mentioning earlier, you have to really advocate and pitch and sell your project. And things only get done if one person cares enough about them, and that person is you. And also you have this whole engineering team dependent on you. Like if you don't get that buy-in, then all their work might have been going to waste. So you have to be like a really like that pushy person. So I would recommend like taking courses, and especially data analysis we spoke about earlier, and then just like doing some project yourself. Even if it's something as simple as like a personal website, which just tells a little bit more about yourself, you'll get more experience, the technical experience.
So I think we'll move on straight from the computer science graduate to the social sciences graduate. So Palvisha has an alternative perspective.
Yeah, so I don't think my perspective will be very alternative to Hania's, because I think our experiences are pretty similar. I do completely understand the value of a technical degree, but at the same time, I think in Pakistan specifically, I think you can achieve a lot by just having an interest in technical knowledge and trying to understand and develop your skill set that way. I feel like because we are quite behind in terms of where Google or Silicon Valley companies might be, it is possible to contribute quite a lot to products by having knowledge and examples from the global perspective and from internet at large. I feel like to get there, reading the right books is very, very important. I know it sounds very boring, but I feel like if you find the right kind of content, it can really help you understand if that is what you want to do in life. I personally read 2 books that helped me a lot with understanding fintech and understanding digital, and understanding how to be a woman leadership in a leadership role as a woman in a big company in Pakistan specifically. So the first book I read was Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. This is one book that can really help women like us understand their place in the corporate sector. It can really help you gain that confidence and that self-reflection that is key, that Hania and I are also talking about, in order for you to understand that your place is just as important as anybody else's. So if I see a woman who is a go-getter, who is somebody who's confident about her own presence, who will not be made quiet by somebody else, who will speak her mind, that is the person who I believe will get there and will break those ceilings and barriers. And that is very important for you to understand that your potential and your place is very, very well deserved. And anybody who believes that at the core can be a really good product manager and can get any job that is possible. The second book, I believe why Hania and I are talking a little similar in terms of our thought process, is the book called that I read called How Google Works. How Google Works is a very, very important book for anybody who wants to understand how to create and how to be in a stellar organization and contribute to the country that you're and the context that you're working in. It really highlights the importance of technical insights and good product management, and to understand that other people can also contribute. So yes, your people skills, your research in and your deep learning, and your ability to be curious about things and to implement ideas is very, very important. But you will not be able to do any of those things if you don't feel comfortable in your own skin. So don't let anybody tell you as a product manager who you are supposed to be and what persona you're supposed to have, because learn from everybody, listen to everyone, but make your own decisions. Even if it's a bad decision, make that decision. So at Jazz, when I joined the Jazz Cash department in 2018, I had a woman chief who was incredible in her work. Looking at her and just learning from her and talking to her has taught me so many things. And just understanding how a woman in a leadership role can change the department, considering that at Easy Pesa we had a male chief, that sort of puts a lot of things in context, right? That the way that people think, the way that management styles can be impacted by personalities, and the way that you can really change your setup by who you are and what you bring to the table. So being comfortable can get you anywhere where you want. It will get you the seat. Learning and reading is going to make sure that you keep that seat. So those are the two things that I would focus on.
Interesting. I think the one highlight from that is primarily the importance of mentors in the product management context, whoever you can relate to. I think so. We'll move on to Fahad, since you have, you've talked a little about moving from operations to product management, but how do you feel that others can do that, and how would they tailor their journey?
Yeah, I think I'll be repeating repeating Hania about it, but I would not emphasize enough on self-starting, on starting your own thing, starting something as an entrepreneur or as your own business. So that would give you the whole context of. So I will just go into the other thing that product management requires. I think two main things, which is first is system thinking, where you have to have the ability to think end to end, think what metrics whatever you do, what metrics will it impact. So system thinking for the whole organization is very important. And the other thing is people management. So the startup can give you both of it in that experience and in a very short time. So I would not emphasize enough on that. The other thing is that you mentioned that on operations and analytics side is the way I think the people in industry can navigate through product management. That's what my story is. I think analytics and coupled with operations can give you the whole idea of system thinking, and with the right passion towards like solving things, problem solving, will give you that seat that Palvesh was talking about. And of course, to remain on that seat, we need to improve. We need to learn what actually experts say. So yeah, uh, and I would also second that engineering background thing that Hania talked about. But in our context, in this local context, most of the companies will also encourage analytical background, will also encourage operational background, because most of our startups or tech companies will have operations as well. So that kind of background will also help. And going on to what um, uh, Palwasha suggested, I can also suggest one book that I read that is actually very important in terms of opening up your mind, which is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel, which actually talks about how you can um, structure a problem or solve it through different means by using your two sets of mind, which is fast and slow mind. So it's very interesting book if someone wants to read about. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Fahd. Now, Tafsir, as I understand, you actually did not start in digital product management, but actually pivoted after a year or so in Dawood Hercules. So, how do you think that others can join in, whether they want to start off in product management straight after graduation, or they want to pivot from another job?
So I think it's very important before you decide on if you want to be a product manager is to understand what a product manager is going to do. And as rightly pointed out by my fellow panelists here, you need a lot of different soft skills and technical skills in order to thrive at your job, right? And at the end of the day, there's soft skills like persuasion, stakeholder management, which you need to be good at, and their technical skills as well, which play an important role in persuasion at the end of the day. Because as a product manager, what you need to understand is the product design and the interaction of systems that takes place at the back end, right? And at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to actually offer a design that sort of connects with the engineering team as well, and also the commercial side of things as well. So what I'd suggest for people who are interested in product management is to actually go through the design sprint process as well. And what they can do using that process is to actually understand how different problems can be approached very, very differently. And also what I'd want people who are aspiring to be product managers is to also focus on app analytics as well. Because without data, it's very, very important to understand that without data, all of the assumptions or all of the conclusions that you're making are primarily subjective. And what you need to have is the right data in place and the visibility on that data in order to make data-driven decisions and in order to decide where the product is going to go and the direction that you're going to take as a product manager. So apart from this, what you can also sort of read up on is how usability research, usability studies are conducted, how you can improve your product using those techniques, how you can use app development, knowledge of app development. It doesn't matter if you're not an app developer. It's just that you need to have a strong and a sound understanding of how things work and of how, let's say, for example, a product feature that you want to be developed for your app is actually possible or not. So that is something which you should really be focusing on. And number crunching is something that you should not be afraid of. If you feel like you don't have the right skill set in order to be actively involved in data analytics, maybe start off with something simple and look at different models and structures to actually understand how your in-app analytics work. Look at product funnels and product funnel optimization, how the customers can be segmented based on the different use cases that they're using within the product, and how we can use those segments to actually drive adoption of the app, right? So this is very crucial for you as a product manager to understand what feature is driving the most value for your product and what type of features the audience is looking for. Because at the end of the day, you might be working on something really special and really close to your heart, but at the end of the day, if the customer does not want that particular feature, the end result is going to be pretty bad. And so at the end of the day, your role is not just to launch that product, your role is to actually make that product a success. And so that is something which is very, very important. And keeping in mind the local context, I do feel like a lot of companies have a structure where the PM drives the engineering side of things. So when the PM is driving the engineering side of things, I think it's very important, as correctly mentioned by the fellows here, to be a self-driven. And you need to be able to understand that you are the one who's responsible for driving the product, and you are the one who's going to be responsible for the timelines as well. So I think that is something which is very, very important for people to understand. Once they do have a sound understanding of all of these aspects, of all of these features, they can very easily get into the product management space by applying to companies that are actually working in this particular category. But it's very important to know the skill set that you need and to also understand that this is something that you want to do.
Thank you, Tafsir, for this answer. Now, I think we can move on to the questions, and we have a lot of them. We'll actually start with a very common question, which is, what does an average workday look like for product managers? What percentage is spent speaking to developers versus in front of the screen versus consumer research? I think we'll start
There's
with
no fixed
Fahad,
work
and
day.
then yeah. Okay,
For
so
product
in
managers.
jazz, you feel that there is no fixed quota, right? So Fahad,
Yeah.
do you have an alternative, or does it vary from time to time?
So you need to have first. You need to have more than 24 hours in a day. I think that's. Uh, but yeah, I think most of the most part is you might not like it, but you most part is project management. So project management is like not product management, project management. So basically managing the scrums, and I don't know if everyone knows Scrum, but Scrum is a way of working in product management, where we work in sprints in 2 weeks or 1 week sprint, and get done these or get all the tasks done in that period. So managing that project by sprint is where the most time consumed, but we would not ideally want it to be consumed there. So, but the fact is this. The other is communicating with the stakeholders. People communicating with the stakeholder in terms of alignment, in terms of communication of the product, as well as uh, solving the problems where there are no problem. Like for example, there might be issues in the product, and you have to have a sense of where is the problem is, and you have to deal with the business in the day-to-day life. But the ideal way, where we have to spend we spend in phases where we need to do product discovery. What are the current business problems in the business in your domain? You need to do research on it. You need to talk to the user as much as possible to understand the core issues. What is the top core issues the user is facing, and where the user is facing. This is the one input that you can get through research. The second input is data. Um, as much as you can analyze the data at most granular level, you need to do that. So these two forms a product discovery, and then if it is aligned with the vision, we need to conceptualize it, make it as a solutionizing project, and then you sit with engineers. You need to have a bunch of solutions to solve a basic problem, and then you actually formulate how to solve that problem in a way that design is perfect for the user experience. Everything else is intact. The adjacent metrics are intact, and then we go into that sprint and development, and you do project management. That cycle goes on.
Thank you. So the next question is directed at Parvisha. So the question is that what is the role of employee creativity in banking sector, which follows very standardized procedures? So how do you balance the creativity with the standardized procedures that banks have? I'll just
I think that's a very interesting question. So for banking, I'm so sorry. Yeah, for the banking sector, compliance is a very important and key part of who you are, what you need to serve as a product manager. You need to ensure, because you're responsible for people's livelihoods and money that they have earned all their lives and their bank accounts, managing them and making sure that security is a primary concern is a huge responsibility. And thinking responsibly about your creative process is something that you learn when you work in an organization like that, because you understand the stakes of what your problem or what your lack of thought process or responsibility can do, and that is huge damage to actual consumers. So creative thinking, I believe, is also a process that needs to be sometimes in a structure. And in that structure, when you start looking at it as a barrier, of course, then there is no way out of it. But when you start looking at it as an opportunity, as at least I make sure that my team members look at it that way, is something that really helps you see new parts of your thought, of your ideas that you never thought were possible before. For example, app security and passwords in any banking applications are much more longer and much more stronger. And as when I entered HPL, my first question was, why do we have an 8-digit alphanumeric password that nobody will remember, and the customer will continue to click on forgot password every time he looks at their apps? And that is a question that everybody would still look at if they use the HPL mobile app. And then it made me realize that that is something that the customers themselves demanded, because customers felt that having a large sum of money in their accounts was only secure if they had a longer password to begin with. And when we tried to change that with a pin, people pushed back, saying that this is something that could be figured out very easily, even though a 6-digit password pin is a longer pin that most of the companies are offering but we still had to go ahead with it. And we realized that that is something that the customer also wants. So compliance is a need, is a customer need. It's not really a barrier in an organization, it is something that the customer demands. Security is something that the customer demands, and as a product manager, it is your duty to deliver that. For me, I can think, yes, a 4-digit pin would make the most sense for me to navigate through an application. Having the least amount of steps is the best way possible for me to go forward. But that is not what the banking consumer is asking for in most cases in Pakistan, and we all know how brown people are about their money and how in control they want to feel about their money, right? So dealing with that and seeing that as an opportunity is a very important thing, rather than seeing it as a barrier, and you will make wonders. We have a game in our application called Invite and Earn, and it shows customers to earn like a potential that they are able to see their potential earning turn into real money, and where exactly in the process of registration their friend is. And that is something that we were able to do at HPL. That is something that a bank was able to allow me to do, and that is something that I take a lot of pride in, because it sort of engages so many users organically online, and that is something that inherently a bank would be wary of. But now it is used as an example bank wide to see into solutions that are compliant and that are secure but also creative.
thank you, Balvisha, for that. Another related question is for Tafsir. As in, you worked into self-help telco applications, and that means that you have to change the consumer behavior from going to shops to using the app for recharge and stuff like that. So how has your experience been specifically regarding those self-care apps?
Yeah, so as earlier mentioned as well, people are very hesitant to move towards digital platforms. And what we've done essentially is to understand the customers, divide this into segments, and to actually see which features are working for the customer and why the customer is using our app. So at the end of the day, what you have to do is understand the in-app usage of your product, right? So if a customer is more inclined towards having offers in the app, then you give them more offers and give them variation to actually choose from. So what we did in my Telenor was that the customer was not able to have a customized bundle within the app. And we launched a build your own bundle sort of a feature where the customer could actually choose the minutes that they wanted, choose the data that they wanted, and create a bundle customized for their own particular needs. And that took off pretty well. What we also did was actually introduce content within the app to actually understand and see if the customer would want to actually view content within the self-care platform. So that also gave us a lot of insights in terms of the different interests that the customers could actually use to engage them towards the app, right? So at the end of the day, what we wanted to do and what we did with all of these telco self-care platforms is to first deliver on their specific needs as a GSM user and as a GSM consumer, and then to also engage them further by driving or giving them add-on features within the app. So at the end of the day, what challenge that we faced with telco self-care platforms was that the user did not open the app every day, right? So that's a challenge which you face because you recharge your account once a month, twice a month, maybe subscribe to a bundle once a month, and that's it. So that's one of the major challenges which we addressed in Jazz World as well. We have gaming within Jazz World, so they're HTML5 based games, but at the end of the day, they can play. The users can come into Jazz World and play games for free. And we also gave them a daily reward gamification type of a feature where they were able to actually come back to the app every day and get rewards based on their activity. So that is something which we feel and I feel like product managers have to do and they have to adapt. But the importance here once again lies within the in-app usage that you have, right? So if we did not have insights and the data to actually tell us what the customers were doing, that they were not coming back to the app, we wouldn't have been able to figure this out, right? And that's what's most important here.
Thank you, Tasir. So in the interest of time, we'll be taking the last question, and it is based on something that Hania said. So Hania, you talked about product managers as CEOs of the product. So someone asked that a product manager that I recently spoke to said that we like to imagine ourselves as CEO, which sounds more sexy, but we don't have more authority. The engineers we work with frequently have their own bosses. So how do you manage that accountability without the authority?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think that's probably the hardest skill set that I had to learn in the last few years is influencing without authority. And so basically, I think what you need to do is get people to buy into whatever your vision is. And there's many ways to do that and many things that will help you along the way. Number one is just like be friends with people. Like often if I was meeting, whenever I join a team, I spend the first 2 weeks just getting coffees with people, and it's great to have that one introduction where you're just not doing anything except asking them about themselves, and people love talking about themselves. Just like you're not asking them to do anything for you. You're just saying like, hey, tell me about yourself, and then the next time when you do want something from them, they remember you with like a positive thing. So make sure you have good relationships and build up those good relationships. I think also an easy way is just to constantly acknowledge or thank or just like be really positive and compliment, etc. So that's one. Second is then how do you actually arm yourself that if you want, like let's say if you want to launch project X, how do you prove to those engineers and their bosses that this is actually relevant? So often it can happen that your boss and their boss agrees, but the engineers themselves are not bought in. So you need to get them excited. You need to like show them the data, show them the potential impact. Every time I'm kicking off a new project, I don't start with like, okay guys, this is the timeline and this is what we have to launch. I start with like a visiony, very flowery slide of like, guys, we're going to help this many people with this thing, like we're going to solve all these problems, and just like get people excited because what they're doing is actually going to help. And then also just, I think for me, being really honest and open, because things will go wrong. And you will make mistakes, and engineers will make mistakes, and engineers will suffer because of mistakes that you made. But don't try to like hide or cover up or blame. If I think often owning it and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I made this decision at the time with the data I had at that time, and then it played out and it was wrong and it delayed the timeline or whatever happened, and I'm sorry, and then just like go back and say, okay, how can we amend this, etc. And also just like at Google, we have this culture of like giving peer bonuses when someone does something good, or basically acknowledging within the team, doing like surprises or like cakes and stuff for launches, or like even pranks. Like there's other things that are just building up a good work culture. And so when you have a good relationship with someone informally, and also another advice is that when you start in a new team, take something really small, like a really small problem for the team, and just solve it for them.
Okay. Thank you,
Documents into one deck, so whenever the next person needed to ramp up, they could just go to that. Deck. And then the team was just like, oh my God, this
is this my internet or is it Hania's issue?
I think it's
Hania
been interrupted for me as well.
Okay, so I think it's an issue on her end. So we will now, I think we will end. So thank you everyone for your time. Before we move on, I'd like to again thank the outreach partners, IBA Marketing Club and KSBL. We actually had a lot of registrations from both these schools, in addition to LUMS and a lot of professionals as well. Thank you again to all the panelists, Fahad, Tafsir, Palvisha, and Hania in absentee. So, and thank you for the audience. We actually had a great response. There were more than 100 unique users during this webinar. And we will now actually start to conduct more events regarding other topics such as data science, business analytics, and stuff like that. So thank you everyone for your time. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any feedback for us or the panelists or the event itself, you can email us, message us on Facebook, or message us on LinkedIn. Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you for having me.